President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Again, I'd like to hand the floor to the International Council for Case upon to put further questions to the expert. You may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Isa Osman, we have referred to your research methodology a number of times, as well as the methodology used at DCCAM. I refer specifically to some passages in your book, but I would like you to react to part of a report by Henri Locard, who refers to the issue of the methods used by DCCAM, particularly as regards figures, and it is document E3/2649, ERN in French 0061 4111, ERN in English 00208 395, and it continues on the next page. ERN in Khmer 00660598. To be complete, let me say that this is a report that was drawn up on the former northern region of Kampong Cham in zones in sectors 41 and 42, and it is the period from 1991 to 2005. The passage I'd like to quote is as follows. And here Locard refers to the figures given to him as regards the number of deaths and pits that existed in the region. And this is what he states, and I quote, free translation. When I asked whether the figures given by DCCAM were reliable, in parentheses, 32,042 victims, more than 400 pits, and he said the figures he got was 32,007. 39,007, and he talked of people who were executed. So the total was then 39,008. I do not know why so many people were killed. And Locard gives this comment. Obviously, those are extravagant PRK figures decreed by the authorities in the early PRK period. Those could never have been that accurate, since we were just told that all the archives had been destroyed and lost, mainly by ignorance and negligence, as the authorities are said to have had no responsibility in their disappearance. Typical of the research by DCCAM, their inexperienced young researchers just noted the figures from the PRK period and perhaps never carried out independent investigations themselves. End of quote. The interpreter corrects that the figures given earlier were 32,690 victims and 467 pits. This is a comment by Henri Locard, who is criticizing the manner in which some officials of DCCAM carried out research. Are you aware of these criticisms? And did some authors and researchers also criticize the research methods of DCCAM and the manner in which they obtained their sources?
President, please hold on, Mr. Osman. Judge Lavan, you have the floor.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. President. I feel that these figures concern the security center, which was referred to as Wat Otrakun. I don't know whether that is how it was said, but it is important to clarify that point. Council Gise, no problem. My question is not so much on figures as on the methods of research, following the comment by Mr. Henri Loka. So we are talking of Loka's criticism of research methodology, not so much the figures provided.
Witness, the question is rather general. My research is focusing on JAM issue, and I am invited to testify before the chamber about JAM people issue. Your question has something to do with the criticism of Henri Loka, in particular the research methodology used by the DCCAM. That question should be referred to the director of the DCCAM. That is more appropriate to put to me. President, the question is directed to you as an expert witness about the weaknesses and also the carelessness of the research or authority, said the President. So they want to know about your reaction, particularly in relation to the figure criticized by Henri Loka. And the counsel for the accused want to know your reaction, whether that figure is accurate or not accurate, not accurate. So please give your response. If you do not know, you can say so. You cannot suggest the counsel to put the question to other witnesses. This question is considered the question to cross-examine the witness, and the questioning methods are being used in this court and may be used by the domestic courts in the future, because they might be considered as the model of questioning methods.
Monsieur Issa Ousmane, avant.
Mr. Issa Oman, before responding, let me clarify the point by saying that at the beginning of my examination, I put questions to you regarding methodology, and I referred to a DCCAM document, which is cited at the end of your book, Ukuba, in which reference is made to DCCAM. You yourself stated that you relied on the methodology laid down by DCCAM in your research. When I refer to criticisms made in general terms by Henri Loka against the methods used as regards the figures, I would like you to react to such criticisms. And I'm asking you whether you heard such criticisms, and what do you have to say regarding those criticisms, which you have answered questions regarding your research choices, which could have an impact on your reflections, impede your reflections. And Henri Loka makes a criticism saying that there's a lack of verification of certain figures, because certain figures were taken as taken for granted. And my question to you is whether you have any particular reactions as regards your work and following the fact that you've been a researcher at DCCAM.
Answer. I have heard about the criticism not only by Henri Loca but by other researchers as well, the history researchers. Some researchers may have found different figures, and they have criticized that the certain figures used by the DCCAM are not accurate. However, the DCCAM is still in the position that the research or figures they have found are based on what the witnesses told. If witnesses made a mention clearly specific figure, we had to follow that figure. We cannot overstate or put in the document the figure which is less than what a witness is told. Besides testimonies, interviews of witnesses, we have DCCAM based on other contemporaneous documents or documents from Lon Nol's time. So if the information in those documents are not accurate, so it is the matter of those documents.
Et sur la question particulière,
And on the specific issue of figures and documents or information on the Democratic Kampuchea regime, do you have any particular reaction, bearing in mind that after the fall of Democratic Kampuchea, a new political regime was established? There are questions asked, there are discussions regarding the official documents on Democratic Kampuchea that were published during that period. Did you yourself consult documents of the Democratic Kampuchea regime in writing your book?
Answer. Perhaps there are two documents used by me. Those documents were compiled in Khmer Republic regime. They are about the death of the Cham people and the death of the leaders of Cham people.
et savez-vous, est-ce que vous avez le souvenir de...
Do you remember the date on which those documents were written?
Answer. Unless I go back to those documents, I may have recalled, and perhaps that is included in the first book that I have authored. So do you allow me and give me time to go to my book so that I can find the date for you?
Il n'y a pas de souci, effectivement, c'est une...
No problem. I can cross-check that myself. Another question regarding the democratic of the People's Republic of Kampuchea. You talked of Mat Lee in answer to a question put to you by my colleague of the Nonchea team, and you talked about his background And you also stated that you interviewed him as part of the interviews you conducted while you were working at DC camp. Do you remember the different duties and responsibilities he held during Democratic Cambodia?
Answer. Madli was one of the cadres. He was among the leaders of Patbong Khmong. Previously, it was in Kampong Cham province. The committee, the district committees at the time consisted of 3 individuals, and among the 3, he was in that group.
Je ne sais plus, je crois que c'était en réponse aux questions.
In answer to a question put to you by Judge Lavang, you said that he was district secretary. Do you know whether in 1978, before he left the regime, do you recall whether he held the position of deputy chief of Kbong Tumum district?
Ban. Answer. He was the second person among the 3. He was the deputy secretary of the Bong Khmom district.
Est-ce que vous pouvez rappeler également à la...
Can you also remind the chamber of the position he held subsequently after the fall of the regime? Within the People's Republic of Cambodia.
Answer. I can recall that he was the deputy minister in the government, but I did not do the research specifically on his role and function. However, Cham people knew very well that he was a dignitary in the Social Republic of Cambodia. He was one of the leading person of Cham community.
Dans un document
In a document we have on record, E3/3555, which I believe only exists in English, and is titled
à l'ERN en
Ethnic Groups in Cambodia. The ERN in English is 00489-348, and it is stated therein that Matli also played a role, and I'll quote the sentence in English in order not to distort what he stated.
noted above, this gentleman had been a Khmer Rouge defector and an important figure in the PRK as the prosecutor in the tribunal which tried Pol Pot and Ieng Sary in absentia. Fin de citation.
End of quote. Does that refresh your memory as to the position he held as a prosecutor in that particular trial?
Answer. Yes, His name was in the case file to try a Pol Pot's Inksery clique in 1979. However, I cannot tell you what function he was playing at the time during the tribunal.
Je reviendrai un petit peu plus.
I will return to Matli and another figure of the Cham community subsequently. For the time being, I would like us to talk about part of your book, specifically the Cham Rebellion, and I'll talk about a passage on which you have already made comments in answer to questions put to you by Judge Laveng, and the passage of interest to me is in the folder I've given to you. And I believe it is the first folder, exhibit number 5. The document in question is E3/2653. The ERN in English is 00219176. And you are referring to a telegram. It's a reference to a telegram. The number is E3/511. And in answer to a question put to you by Judge Laveng, you stated that there was indeed an error in your book. And I'll quote the passage in question in English.
Vous parlez donc.
You are talking of a telegram, and this is what you say.
Reports were also addressed to Nguyen Chea and Khieu Samphan. The report specifies these enemies as being the following: former London soldiers, some former chairmen of cooperatives who had served under the older, smaller scale system, and the entire Cham race. Fin de citation.
End of quote. As regards the first error you acknowledged, that is the fact that you mixed up Khieu Samphan with Comrade Khieu. That was the revolutionary alias of Son Sen. And you said you did on that matter. And the second point on this telegram, which you have before you, has to do with the following question. Do you agree that when you look at it, when you consult the telegrams and documents of that era, you consult them in Khmer? Isn't that correct?
Answer. Concerning my research and the start of writing of my book, first I wrote it in Khmer.
D'accord, donc nous ce que...
Very well. We may have translation programs before this tribunal, but you wouldn't have any problems in consulting telegrams since they are in Khmer. Again, this might be an issue of methodology. You may have gone wrong on the name of a leader of Democratic Kampuchea, as was the case in your document. As part of your work, your research, and the consultation of documents, did you do any background research on the different officials and the evolutionary aliases of the persons involved? And you would bear in mind that during the Democratic Kampuchea period, they relied a lot on aliases and codes.
Answer. As I have told the court already, I acknowledge that I have some weaknesses in writing my book. At the time when I started to write my book, I did not have a large amount of documents to consult, and I did not have chance to meet all the interviewees. And after the publication of the book, I concluded that Q was referring to Kyu Sompon, but in fact it was not. So I would like to make a correction on this point.
Of course, that might correspond to your lack of knowledge of the revolutionary alliances of the leaders of Democratic Kampuchea. But now regarding the inclusion of the mention, the entire Cham race, which corresponds to your position, which I will not discuss here because it's up to the chamber to determine the issue of genocide or not. But this error, which is not a translation error because you're working on the Khmer original here, well, this is an important issue, an important aspect of your argument in your book. So the fact of distorting the documents that you reviewed, which completely changed their meaning, isn't that an error linked to the fact that you are Cham and that you also have a need for justice and that you cannot be neutral, and you said even that your book Kuba could be related to that, to justice. Didn't that prevent you from having an objective analysis and a thorough analysis of the documents that you reviewed when you wrote your book?
Mr. President, I would just ask for some clarification of the question. It was a very long question, but it seems to be predicated. Counsel has stated that the witness grossly distorted what's written on the telegram. I think what she's referring to is that the telegram talks about the enemies being former soldiers in combination with the Cham, and in the book written by the witness, it talks about the entire Cham race. So there's no qualification of the Cham that it's referring to any particular parts of the Cham race or individuals. So I just think the question includes an assumption. She could ask the witness how he understands the words the Cham, and furthermore it's very argumentative, the question is phrased.
I must say that I'm very surprised by the co-prosecutor's observation. And maybe I should start here. Let me read out the famous document E3/511. And this specific excerpt. In this specific excerpt, Isa Osman comments a document which a priori is telegram E3/511 and which is referred to as a footnote. A footnote to the excerpt that I'm going to quote.
Ce télégramme.
So he's speaking about this telegram, and he says, In English,
these enemies as being the following: former Lonel soldiers, some former chairmen of cooperatives who had served under the older, smaller scale system, and the entire Cham race. Et maintenant,
and now I'm going to read out the excerpt E3/511 of this document, which is therefore referred to as a footnote, and that corresponds to the comments of Isa Osman in his book. And this is what is said. First, mention is specifically made of the North Zone, and this is what is said at point 1. I will read slowly, but I believe, Isa Osman, you have the document before you, yes? The general situation of the enemies in the North Zone in its entirety, the enemies have not carried out full-scale action that had an effect on the population or the general production trains. In brief, the situation seems to be stable. However, at the same time, they propagated rumors to make us believe that the revolution was tense, to discredit the cooperatives and the building of the new dike system, and to make us believe that there was a famine. And here, I will continue with my quote, but more specifically, they're speaking about Chamka-Le district. In reality, there were problems in Chamka-Le district. The enemies were former soldiers, as well as Cham and former cooperative leaders. And they posted photographs and the release of 18 March 1970 of this knoll on the tree trunks close to Trapeang Krabo village, Chamka-Le district. End of quote, free translation. So in this excerpt, and this allows me to react to what you said, Isa Osman. In this passage, mention is made of facts that happened in the North Zone, and mention is specifically made of Chamka-Le district. And in Chamka-Le district, mention is made of former soldiers of Cham and of former cooperative chiefs who posted pictures and a release from 18 March 1970. So my question is, how were you able to conclude from this passage, from this document that speaks specifically about certain Chams and about former cooperative chiefs who did a certain number of things that are held against the author of the telegram? How do you go from that to the entire Cham race? How do you make that leap from these people to the entire Cham race?
I am now reading the original Khmer document, in particular on the point highlighting the word jam. It reads that the enemies are former soldiers together with the Jam people, but it did not specify the type of the Jam people, and probably that is the reason that led to mistranslation. As stated in my book, that is the entire Jam race. In my view, it is not really a mistranslation, because the focus is on the Cham, the entire Cham people living in Chamka-Le. And if you refer to the original Khmer document, it refers to those Cham people in Chamka-Le district. It means the entire Cham people or Cham people community in Chamka-Le.
So the entire Cham community of Chamka-Le, if that was your interpretation, which is your own, of course, here we're not speaking about the entire Cham race. And I'd like to get back to the document once again, E3/511. When the enemies are specified, mention is not made of the majority of the former Lon Nol soldiers or of the Cham at whole or of the cooperative leaders. What is stated is the enemies were former soldiers as well as Cham and former cooperative team chairman. They use copies of a photo of Lon Nol and Lon Nol's announcement of 18 March 70 to post on tree trunks near Trapiang village in Cham Ka Lo district. So when we read out this the totality of what's written here, it is clear that mention is made of people who committed certain acts such as posting photographs and a release from 1970, and mention is not made of the totality of the Cham race. So telling me that this may be a problem of translation, you who work directly from the original in Khmer, didn't you extrapolate in relation to what is said in this telegram?
In fact, the question is beyond my ability to respond, as English is not my native language. If you ask me to cross-check the translation to the original the Khmer text, I cannot provide you an accurate response. And also, the English text is not put in a bracket, as I indicated this morning. When words are used in the bracket, it means that it is an original quotation on the account or on the interview of a people. And for example, if I like to quote this document, then the wordings will be put in the bracket. However, in my book, it is part of my analysis that the word Cham there was used to mean those entire Cham population living in Cham Ka Lo. So as I said, I do not have the ability to verify with you whether the English translation is proper.
Well, in reality, we have a translation unit in this tribunal, and this document has already been translated. So my question was a little bit more specific than that. I read out the excerpt which is at the base of your analysis. So I understand from your answer that based on the excerpt that I read out, which specifically just speaks about former soldiers, Cham, and former cooperative leaders who committed certain acts which they are criticized for in this telegram, you deemed that you could conclude that this involved the entire Cham race, not only the Cham of Cham Ka Lo. So this does not even correspond to the analysis that you're providing us today. So my question is the following. Don't you think that when you read documents from the period, you read them under the influence of what you might want to demonstrate and not based on the objective information in these documents?
No, that is not the case. You can say whatever you want. For me, I authored the book based on the documents, based on the accounts of people I interviewed, and my analysis based on my professional ability.
Well, since I don't have much time left, I would like to move on to another point. We heard Saleh Samat before this chamber, and in your book, The Cham Rebellion, you spoke about his testimony. And on the case file, we have an excerpt from your book, The Cham Rebellion, document E3/9323, French ERN 00286-658, Khmer ERN 00275387, English ERN 0021852, and I believe that you may find the excerpt in question at tab 4, correction interpreter, in your binder, in the binder that I just gave you today. And this is what is stated in this excerpt, and you speak about Saleh Samat, and he says that at the end of 1978, he drove a motorcycle for the district secretary, who did not know how to ride a motorcycle, to bring him to a meeting in Sandang district in Kompong Thom. So, given that Saleh was not supposed to participate in this meeting, he waited outside, and he stated that while he was waiting outside, he could see the district secretaries from the east and central zones in the meeting room. And he could also hear what was being said during that meeting because they were using loudspeakers inside. And at one point in time during the meeting, Kepok, who was the secretary of the central zone, whose representatives had just taken the east zone in a violent conquest of power, asked the Krochmar district secretary, which percentage of the party objectives have we achieved? And Saleh declared that Kepok then specified, you must first destroy the Cham in the mobile units because they are all traitors. End of quote, free translation. So, when Saleh appeared before the chamber, a certain number of questions were put to him. And this was the question that was put to him on 9 March 2016. A little bit after, or a little bit before 1:36 in the afternoon. So it's Judge Lavan putting the question. So were the Vietnamese specifically targeted? As far as you remember, if you don't remember, just tell us that you don't remember. And the witness's answer was the following. In fact, he said that the cadres of the East Zone had a Vietnamese mind and Khmer bodies, and other people were accused of being bandits. Judge Lavan continued then. So at one point during the meeting, did they specifically discuss the Cham and what was said in relation to the Cham? And Saleh Samat's answer was no. Back then, we didn't speak about the Cham because the Cham had been deported. They only spoke about the cadres of the East Zone back then. Then he continues a little bit after 1:40, this is. And the question that was put to him was the following. So the plan was to eliminate all of the members of the mobile units or all of the CHAM who were part of the mobile units? And the answer was the following. All of the members of the mobile units had to be purged, had to be eliminated. Then, following question. And at one point in time during the meeting, were any questions put specifically regarding the CHAM? The answer was, questions were put regarding the CHAM, the Khmer, but the plan consisted in purging cadres from the East Zone. Question, so there was no mention of a plan specifically geared at the CHAM more than other categories of people who were considered traitors. Is that what we must understand? And the answer was the following. Yes, that's true. All traitors had to be executed. And then, to give you a full picture here, there was a certain number of comments regarding what he might have seen and not seen. So this differs a little bit from the accounts such as you related, but this is not very, very important. However, the question, after having quoted the excerpt from your book, and this was the following question on 9 March 2016, a little bit before 4:02 in the afternoon. So my question is, witness, did you discuss this point? Did you say this to Mr. Isa Osman when he questioned you? That is to say, that everyone was going to be smashed regardless of his or her race, Khmer, Cham, or Chinese? And this was the answer. I don't remember the answer that I gave back then. No one was spared back then. Everyone's life was threatened. If we betrayed Angkar, we risked being executed, whether we be Cham or Khmer. Those who had betrayed Angkar, in particular those from the East Zone, were executed. End of quote. Free translation. So this, I'm quoting this so that you can have in mind what Saleh Samad said before the chamber, and to understand if that is what he said to you when you interviewed him, because when he testified before the chamber, he said that there was no, or he did not hear during this meeting anything specific connected to the Cham, but generic decisions regarding all people who had betrayed the Angkar. So can you comment this? Do you have any specific reaction to what Saleh Samad said before the chamber?
Your question is very long, although I seem to get the gist of it. I interviewed Saleh Samad, and the audio record of that interview is available at the DCCAM office. And after the interview, his account has been included in my book. My Dixon, the OCIJ investigator, actually went together with me to meet this person, Saleh Samad, and to verify the account that his account that I published in my book. He checked it, and he also provided a thumbprint on that piece of document as shown in this document. However, during his testimony before this chamber, he did not mention this, or he did not recollect that account, and that is a matter of his recollection and not a matter that I wrote his account differently in my book.
Well, regarding the excerpt, when he says he didn't remember, what he's really saying is that he doesn't remember what he said to you. But as you noted, the question.
I apologize. Your Honor, I think since counsel is putting, I believe she's saying, a fair reading of Saleh Ahmad's testimony, I think it would be important to include the following answer, which he gave to the court. And this is at 10:43:15 on the same day. I heard from the loudspeaker that the new chiefs assigned to the East Zone needed to implement the policy of the Ankar regarding the smashing of the Cham. And some of them answered that they had implemented 50% of the policies. Some said they had implemented 80% of the policy because Ankar gave the instruction to smash 100% of the Cham. And the group that needed to be smashed needed to be the ones who betray the Ankar, regardless of their ethnicity, whether Cham or Khmer. So I think that is important to include in a fair reading of Saleh Ahmad's testimony.
No problem. Regarding the excerpt that was read out by the co-prosecutor, because the conclusion is the same as the conclusion I provided to you earlier, that say that the witness said that the issue was not whether they were Cham or Khmer, but it was whether they had betrayed Ankar or not. So let me get back to my original question, which is, and of course you answered that and you said that is what he said back then, but my question is, when you questioned him, when you interviewed him, did you interview him only about the Cham, or did you interview him about everything that might have been said regarding all ethnic components of Democratic Cambodia?
My interview was about his general knowledge. However, he actually told me more about the Cham people.
Et donc,
So, therefore, I return to the question that I was putting to you before. So, which means that in the way you process the information, doesn't that hinder you in your thinking? Which means, if you're only asking questions about the Cham only without knowing what happened outside of the Cham community, and regarding people maybe from other communities who betrayed the Ankar, doesn't this have an influence on your conclusions regarding the fact that there was one single policy targeted against the Cham, whereas the Cham might have simply been included among all those who were betraying Ankar and who were being tracked down because they were considered enemies, just as the Khmer or anyone else who was betraying Ankar, as the witness said before the chamber.
As I have stated during the interview, he spoke more about the stories of the Cham people. Although the account he gave during his testimony in this court might be different from what he told me, and my book and the excerpt in my book relied on what he actually told me during that interview.
et c'est précisément.
Well, that is the issue, in fact. The fact that he's speaking more generically before the chamber isn't this linked to the way you put questions and linked to your position during your interview with him?
I think the witness will respond to the questions that are put to them. And for my part, I did not ask him how the Cham people were killed. And in relation to the fact that he actually rode a motorcycle to carry the district committee to the meeting, and that's what I asked him, and then he elaborated further on what he overheard during that meeting about the killing of the Cham people. And that is exactly the excerpt from his interview and put it in my book. And I am maintaining my position that I do not exaggerate or remove any part from the account of the interview. I maintain its integrity in its inclusion in my book.
Monsieur le Président, je vois que le temps...
Mr. President, I see that we are running out of time, and I'm pressing on with my cross-examination, and I'll try to do as much as I can. You also interviewed Mr. Sosiemre on several occasions. You even stated in your book, Ukuba, document E3/1822, the ERN in English is 000785562. You stated there in that you had an interview with Mr. Sosiemre from 1981 to 1982. You state in the two books you published, both in Ukuba, the ERN is 000784441, and the ERN that is for the Cham Rebellion is document E3/2653. The ERN is 00219-059. And you state specifically, and I'm quoting in English, and it is the last but one paragraph.
I would like to acknowledge the support of Ukna Soskamri, Chairman of the Highest Council for Islamic Religious Affairs in Cambodia, and His Excellency Matli, a representative of Kampong Cham and Supreme Personal Advisor to the King. He passed away in 2004. Their introductions helped me gain the trust of many Cham's Muslim communities. Fin de citation.
End of quote. My question is as follows. Should I take it that your interviews with various members of the community were facilitated by those two persons?
Yes, that is correct within that context. In Cambodia, during the time that I conducted the interviews, people did not exercise their full freedom, and it was also the same for researchers. If we were to wish to speak to people in the village, we had to go first to see the village chief and within the jam context, we had to go and see Hakim. As for the person, Sof Kamray, he is well respected, and he is a senior religious Islamic leader within the community. He actually wrote me a letter and the content of that letter is to actually invite the local Cham community leaders to cooperate fully with my research. And this is what I did. I went to see the village chief or Hakim to introduce the letter to them to seek their full cooperation for my research.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, I have not completed my cross-examination, and that is exactly what I said yesterday. We would have needed at least 3 sessions, with 2.5 sessions, and taking into account the discussions we had yesterday, I've not been able to complete my cross-examination. That is why I'm asking for additional time, bearing in mind that I have omitted several subjects that I would have liked to raise with this expert.
President, thank you. However, you will not be granted any additional time. The chamber has actually granted more than ample times for both sides to put questions to this expert. The defense team for Nguyen Chi would like to make their observation in relation to next week and the following weeks of the proceedings. The chamber intends to hear the oral submissions from parties to the request about the defense team for Nguyen Chi, so that we can actually conclude the session for the expert this afternoon. The chamber decided to give 50 minutes to the co-prosecutors and the lead co-lawyers, and also 50 minutes to put to the co-defense teams, that is to put to Isa Osman. And after that, the chamber will hear oral responses from parties to the motion filed by Nguyen Chi's defense. We will have an adjournment now for a lunch and resume this afternoon. Court officer, please assist the expert during the lunch break and invite him as well as the OCIJ legal officer back into the courtroom this afternoon. And this afternoon, the floor will be given first to the co-prosecutors as well as the lead co-lawyers for civil parties. Security personnel, you are selected to take Kyo Sampon to the waiting room downstairs and have him return to attend the proceedings this afternoon before 1:30. The court is now in recess.